Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Testimony Thursdays. I'm so excited. Today is the last testimony of June. Many of you guys know I pretty much get on pretty much the month of June to really bring on special guests with me to begin to share their testimony and what God has done in their life. Now, June specifically, our culture celebrates Pride Month, but the Lord began to inspire me to come on here in June specifically to bring on special guests who've come out of a lifestyle of homosexuality and to really celebrate June, the month of promise. So that's exactly what I've been doing for this month. I already had 3 special guests actually throughout the month of June. This is my last guest. I will allow himself to introduce himself in a minute. But many of you guys know what my life verse is specifically that ties around Testimony Thursdays. It's found in Revelations 12, verses 10. And it says, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to the death. What I love about that scripture, because it just lets me know, not only am I an overcomer, maybe you may be in a season where the Lord is really prompting you to actually share your story. And sometimes you're struggling with actually sharing the real story, those dark stuff, those things that, people might look at as shameful. I just want to let you know that's the part that's going to break the yoke off of those who are in bondage. People need to hear that story. So maybe you're not feeling like an overcomer. Well, let me just give you the remedy for that. It's probably because you are not testifying. The scripture says too that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. We have to testify of the things that we have overcome. And what I love about my guests this month is that they've overcome some obstacles in life. And the thing is, what I know about overcoming is the thing that you overcome, you have authority over now. And that's what I love. I just see them being championed in this season in their life and what God is doing in them. I just see God just doing great things for them. So if you are just tuning in right now, just go ahead and let me know where you're watching from. And just go ahead and like, and just do the work of an evangelist. And just go ahead and like and share this live. Tag your friend. And let's engage in conversation with the live as well, too. And if there's any kind of questions you have concerning this conversation, this testimony, just drop it in the comments. And we definitely want to answer those at the end. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. David, if you can, just do a little small introduction about where you're from. And let's start from your childhood as well after that.
All right. Hello, Harry. Hi, how's it going, everybody? My name is David. I'm from Victorville, California. Sorry.
You're good.
I got two. Sorry. But all right. So starting off from my childhood, me growing up. I'm sorry. Where can I start? My mother starting off with my mother. My mom used to. I'm sorry.
So sharing our testimonies are really kind of the Lord. So sharing our testimonies for those ones who are getting on the platform, it's never that easy to really share the story about certain things. But David, I celebrate you because, especially dealing with our childhood, sometimes our childhoods can be a little dark sometimes. And again, too, David, like you feel free to share what you want to share. You don't have to go into a deep place where you don't want to go.
Okay.
But however you want to talk about it, I'm here to champion you on in this moment.
So yeah, as a kid, when my mom was pregnant of me, well, this is hearing from my mom's side that my dad, my biological father, used to beat on my mom while she was pregnant for me, and my mom went through a lot. She went through a lot, and my dad used to tell me that I wasn't his son. So when my mom giving birth to me, she kind of gave me away. And I mean, I don't want to say gave me away, but she was going through so much problems. As in, my auntie, her older sister, took over taking care of me. So she raised me through partial partial of my childhood. Um, my mom ended up leaving my dad. My dad ended up leaving. Well, they ended up separating, and I was already with my mom. I got raised with my mom and my uncle from basically being a baby all the way to 9 years old. And throughout that time being of my mom and my uncle raising me, I would basically weekends I would go stay at my mom's house, and my mom was already going through lostness throughout that time. Um, it was a party house when I would go to her house, and um, it was a lot of open doors to a lot of things, and I don't blame my mom for nothing for what happened. It's the enemy over working through a lot of people, and at the age of 4, that's when I got molested. I got molested, um, and it was an ongoing thing. It wasn't one person, but it was a couple other guys, and all this started happening from the age of 4 to 8. Um, yeah, and so I was getting exposed to a lot of things. The party house, there was drugs involved, everything. And me just seeing that, jumping back and forth from my auntie's house. I called her mom, and it was a good structure home, and at the age of 9, my auntie ended up passing away. She passed away. I saw her in the restroom. She was on the floor, and basically what happened, one of her vessels, one of her veins popped from the back of her brain.
Mhm.
And yeah, just seeing that was also an effect, something that was triggering, as a child. And not only that, throughout that time, I was getting bullied. I was getting bullied in school, and I was that chunky kid. People always used to call me fat, gordo. Uh, I didn't have voice really much. I was basically raised around a lot of girls, and I have my sister. My sister was I have 3 sisters and 3 brothers, but one of my sisters, the one after me, she was the one I looked up to a lot. Because when I was going through the moment of getting bullied at school, my sister was always fighting all these people. She was taking care of me, and it's, it was just all that going on, with me getting molested throughout that time, me getting called names, me getting called a sissy, even through Mexican culture, how it is with people saying names and everything. And they don't realize that kids are sucking, like we're like sponges, we're absorbing all that.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of thing that was taking into my life, that I was taking into my life. And as in going through that, I was hanging around with wrong crowds already. At 7, I was trying out cigarettes for the first time. I was hanging out with teenagers from the block. And yeah, I was getting exposed to a lot of things. And basically, throughout that time, as in me hanging around with a lot of girls, I was doing a lot of girl things. I was playing with Barbies. I never really had a father figure to look out after. And my brothers, I have my 3 brothers, but they were all grown. They were doing their own thing. And yeah, it was basically me being around girls, and that's where it kind of was around my childhood. I was just going through that, dealing through confusion, and
Yeah, David, let me ask you a question. So during your childhood years, and I get to, because I could relate to so much of that. Um, where was Jesus at in the picture. Did you ever know church?
I, I I actually didn't. I was gonna get there.
Okay.
So I had another aunt. I mean, I have another aunt that I would always like to go to her house because they're saying that it sounds windy.
It sounds a little windy, but I mean it's fine. I'm able to hear you.
Okay. So I have another aunt. I would always like to go to my cousins because me and my cousin were like
Yeah.
we're like bubblegum,
Yeah.
We're always with each other and everything. And my auntie, she gave her life to the Lord around 91, I believe so. Somewhere around there. And when I would go visit my aunt, sometimes I'll stay for the weekends, or when summer would come, I'll go stay over there for the summer. And she was taking me to church. So she started taking me to a Christian church. And since I was little, I already knew of church. I thought it was boring.
Mhm.
I was
Yeah.
just like, small Pentecostal Spanish church. And I was just like, oh, it's boring, but it was part of my auntie's rules. And yeah, so basically that's where it was in my childhood, getting introduced into a Christian church and knowing of God.
What was school like? Um, let's try taking off try taking off the headset just to see if it sounds better that way.
Just
Uh,
one
uh,
or
okay, yeah, that sounds better.
okay.
So let's talk about like childhood because you're talking about your childhood, but how kids were. So what was school like in this aspect? Like what was that like for you? Like from like grade school and teenage years? Because I know what that's like in regards to being around females all the time and how that kind of shapes and molds us into how we interact with other people or how we gesture ourselves because it's something that's normal to us. We're always around that at that time. So what was grade school and middle school like for you?
So great elementary school it was. I mean, I still enjoyed my childhood through it, but my mentality was different now because of the things that I started going. I got exposed to getting molested. It started becoming a thing, as in me liking boys. I remember being in second grade and there was this kid that I was looking at, and I was just like, oh, he's handsome. And but at the same time I was thinking like that's not normal. If a princess and a prince are together, how is it that a boy could like another boy?
Yeah.
So that was my mind back then when I was little. And it started becoming something that started becoming more loud in my mind. And I was just like, I seriously, throughout that time, I felt like, you know what, I don't feel normal. I don't feel right. Why am I having these feelings?
Mhm.
And so that mindset kept going forward and forward. To me, it just basically became normal because once again, it was an ongoing thing from the age of 4 all the way to 8 years old.
Mhm.
And to me, I just thought it was normal already for the things to happen to me, as in me losing my innocence and everything.
Mhm.
So going to middle school, I've started my feelings started getting deeper, where I was already seeing myself as in like, okay, like I guess it's cool to start liking dudes or whatever, which I still felt like a black sheep in the world. I'm like, I would just think as in like, man, like this don't feel right, but this is basically who I am. And it was something very silent within myself.
Mhm.
And yeah, so at 13 I was getting exposed basically already to me doing it freely now, like getting to know guys, and I was already messing around with guys. And it was just more coming to an acceptance that this me living that lifestyle was basically who I was.
Mhm.
So I was still scared to actually bring it out because I knew a lot about church. I mean, and it was more about me knowing of church because I wasn't I would read the word, but I still wouldn't comprehend because once again, it was just too the words too were too big
Mhm.
for me to understand as a child, or as a teenager. Um, but it wouldn't feel right throughout the time that I was already doing what I was doing. And so that's when I started getting exposed. Around that age, I was already getting exposed to meth
Mhm.
at the age of 13.
Wow. Okay.
Um, yeah, I got exposed to meth and I was already smoking weed. I was a curious cat. I was curious about it, and I mean, a lot of teenagers go through that because they say you are who you hang around with, and if you hang around with the wrong crowd, you start experience you have open doors to a lot of things. And so when that was happening of me getting exposed, um me getting exposed to that, I mean, I've experienced it from my own mother. My mother was the one that was doing all that. One time I walked into the restroom and I my mom was showering. I was just, Mom, I gotta use the restroom. And I moved the towel from the sink, and that's when the pipe fell. And I told him, like, what is this? And she was just like, started screaming at me. She's like, don't be grabbing this stuff. And since then, I just started having the curiosity to know more.
Mhm.
And then just being around, you know, gangbangers. And I mean, seeing my sister who she hung around with. My sister would hang around with all these gangbangers and everything, and no matter what, I if my sister's listening to this, I love you, sis. I look up to you no matter what still.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, my sister always took care of me, and getting exposed to all that, it just started leading me to somewhere different. I mean, the first time that I did meth, it just I wanted to do it more because I'm like, all right, well, I want to get skinny because I was a big kid. And with me getting bullied and everything, that was something else that was starting to affect me. It started to affect me of me getting bullied, and basically, yeah, it was just basically that. And so that's where it was throughout my teen years. And I mean, at 14, 15, I was already going to house parties.
Mhm.
I was going to house parties, and yeah, I was getting exposed to a lot more. That's when I kind of started drinking at 15.
Yeah.
And um, yeah, so that's where I don't know if you guys remember the party line.
Yeah.
Let's go back to those times, okay?
Okay, so I mean, the part. If you guys know anything about the party line's been out for like years. I'm talking about like early 2000s for me. So, because obviously, I'm a little older than you, David, but I like, yeah, it's been out for a long time. But yeah, I know what you're talking
Okay.
about. Go ahead.
So no, I would get into the party line, and once again, talking about me admiring my sister. My sister was like my role model. I had a very light voice, and when I would talk, I would have a lot of guys be like, "Oh, what's up, girl? How you doing?" This and that. And I would call when they would ask me for my name. I'm sorry about that. When they would ask me for my name, I'll give them my sister's name.
Yeah.
And uh, to me, it was just something that I was enjoying at one point. Even though I know I wasn't a woman, but I would be like, all right, let me play around with these guys. But afterwards, it started taking into role of me wanting to become a woman, and it started. it started becoming a thing. Like I would have like role plays or visions, if you want to say, like in my head of wanting to become a girl. I would picture myself as a girl, like coming home, like getting out of school, getting picked up by that high school jock,
Yeah.
and me being a pretty girl. Um, so from that time, it was from 15, basically my high school years. I kind of was going through that phase, even though I was in party crews. I don't know if you guys remember that
Mm.
party crews where people would have house parties and all that. I was hanging around with that, trying to be somebody, trying to fit in basically. And but I was still on the down low. At 16, I ended up moving out to LA with one of my older sisters, and that's when I got introduced into the GSA club
Mm.
that we used to have at school, Gay Straight Alliance,
Mm.
and I started liking it more because that's where I started finding out people. There was people that had a lot of basically a lot of similarities.
Mm. David, can you your mic cut out?
Could you guys hear now?
Okay, yeah, I can hear you now.
Hello.
I can hear you.
Okay. So basically that's when I got introduced into the GSA, and then once I was part of the GSA community. That's when I started hearing more about Pride, the Pride community. Pride Fest, Pride this. I was all about rainbows. Colorful clothes. My eyebrows were thin. Wear a little bit of lip gloss. You know, that was basically the rise of my flamboyant side,
Mm.
and or if you guys want to say the queen side of me, the feminine side, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so I was when I was into that, I even took dance class in high school. That's when I got introduced into voguing.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I was that chunky kid, but I was very, very happy no matter what. And I was trying to, everything that I was going through my past, I just basically try to bury it.
Mm.
And MySpace was a thing.
Yeah.
MySpace was a thing. So at that time, that's where I would get on MySpace, and I started talking to guys. I was talking to guys, and I was just trying to find love. And then me being a young cat, I was already talking to 32-year-old, and everything.
Yeah.
And yeah, so after that, I mean, at 16, I was okay. I'm sorry. At 16, I was already going to underground clubs in West Hollywood. I don't know if anybody's from Hollywood, but there's this place called Arena.
Mm.
That was
Yeah,
something.
I'm familiar with that place.
Okay.
I definitely that is a thing in regards to underage kids being allowed into adult type settings when it comes. I think it's a normal thing. When I was living that lifestyle, and I believe around when I was 16, 15 years old, um, about 15, 16 years old, I was already going into gay nightclubs. There it was a 21 years and over setting, and yet at that time they weren't doing no card checks. So many people were getting it in, and many of these people were actually kids. So, but yeah, go ahead. I definitely know what you're talking about, the arena.
Yeah, so it was a thing like every Wednesday. Um, so from that, I mean, I was going to Arena. I went to Pride Fest maybe like 3 times throughout my whole life. The first 2 times where I felt that it was fun. Um, so from that, I went to house parties. They called them tea parties.
Mhm.
It was a thing out in LA. it was a big thing. I think it's still going on. Um, and yeah, that's when I was already getting exposed to doing Nas, uh, doing basically computer the air dust. I was already
Yeah.
doing that. Um,
So
yeah,
this
so
so explain a little bit about that. What is that?
the computer cleaner is basically it's the thing that to dust off the computer, like the dirt off of the computer. Or yeah, so we would what we would do, we would basically inhale it and we would get some type of high. But it was bad to the point, it's messing up your brain,
Yeah.
so that's what computer cleaner was.
Oh wow.
um and Nas is basically it's exhaust. I think it's exhaust what they put in the tanks for the trucks or something like that. So they would fill it, and we would fill up the balloons with the air, and then we would inhale that too, and it would give us some type of high. Um, so that was it was kind of going on throughout my teenage years. I hit 18, and that's where I started getting more. I started watching RuPaul's Drag Race.
Mhm.
And when I saw RuPaul's Drag Race, I was like, whoa, like guys could be girls. That's cool.
Mhm.
And since I already had that mentality of me wanting to become a woman, I've basically that's where it was open doors to that, where I started like playing with my sister's makeup. I would put the towel in my head. I'm like, let's see how I would look.
Mhm.
And yeah, so it was that. And then so one time, my one of my friends from that time, they end up doing my makeup, and they're like, "Oh my god, like, you look so good. You look like a girl." And I got hyped up about it, and yeah, so it made me feel more comfortable because once again, I was chunky at that time. I was weighing like 415 pounds, or I was very heavy set, and me feeling comfortable through that time, I started getting more into it at that time. And as I started doing drag, I started posting some pictures up on Facebook. You know what, actually on MySpace. It was when I was transitioning already. Um, I was putting some pictures on MySpace, and then I was getting guys that were messaging me that, oh, let's hang out. And then from there, I started getting into the social media world, and Grinder was when I barely started getting into it. Um, I basically that's where I started. I'm sorry. I started basically dressing up around that time, and yeah, I was in the dating world because I mean, it.
Mhm.
I was getting hyped up by guys telling me like, you make such a pretty girl, and then I would tell them, I would be honest, I'll be like, you know what, I'm a guy, that's me, but I'm a guy. And
Yeah.
I would have people cussing me out. I'll have guys that wanted to talk to me, and but it never. I was very scared to actually hang out with them because I'm like, what if they kill me? What if they do this or that?
Yeah.
And so going back to that, I'm sorry. As I kept doing that, it was just becoming more comfortable, and I started having my friends tell me like, you make such a pretty girl, and I had a lot of guys tell me, and that's where confusion started coming more, as in like, should I start transitioning? I
Mhm.
mean, should I transition into a woman? But I would be like, I can't afford it. I can't afford to do this. And I don't know. So that's where I was like buying wigs. It was an on and off thing when I was doing drag. It wasn't. I was doing it constantly, or I don't want to say drag because I mean I never performed like that. I want to say, I mean, more cross dressing, if that's the right term to say.
Mhm.
Um, and so throughout that time, I was enjoying it more, and then I end up stopping for a little bit. I went back to church. My oldest brother, he got saved since '95, and he would take me to church. And at that time, I was already going through like a spiritual like a spiritual awakening, if that's what you want to say. um where God was already telling me like that was it wasn't who I was, and it was hard for me to understand because I'm like, God, like, why am I gay, and why can't I just love you, you know?
Mm.
And it was confusing because I was just like, man, like, the church is so wrong because they're always like bashing at gay people. And another thing that I didn't mention, my mom, after leaving my dad, my mom was living the lesbian lifestyle. My mom basically, her hair was short. She was basically dressing up as a boy.
Mm.
And so what was I gonna get with that? As in me basically fighting that, of me having that relationship with God, but at the same time me still wanting to live this lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I even tried to date a girl at that time, but I end up pulling away because I'm like, you know what? I'm a hypocrite. Why am I gonna try to be with a girl if this is who I am and this is what I like, you know? So I end up stopping. I stopped, I mean, going to church, and around that time, I got back into sin. You know, I don't want to be too graphic about it, but, you know, I was just lusting with guys, and, you know, it was just becoming something horrible. And even around that time that I was in the moment of the whole shenanigans, I remember God putting it in my heart, and I was crying because of things that I was doing, but at the same time, I kind of, like, I was crying through that moment, but I kept going back to my wicked ways, you know. And that's where I was going to clubs a lot. I was from the age of 18. I was literally clubbing every weekend, from this club named Oasis 340, and then I started heading out to West Hollywood. um yeah, I was there every weekend, and it was just, that was my excitement. It was my excitement of just hanging out with friends, drinking, just doing the most,
So you
And
you mentioned about your brother being saved, and actually attending church. So where was he at in during all this time in your life? I mean, was there like communication? How did like the invitation come into like, hey, let's come to church? Like, how did that
so
conversation go with your family as far as in you being like this and this moment, dressing up, doing all this, type of stuff? Were they involved in that part of your life? Did they mention anything?
not much. I mean, my brother, he would come on and off. He would come and visit us off. I mean, not visit as much because, once again, how I mentioned, it was a party house, and my brother was going through his journey with his family too. But throughout that time, my brother would pick us up even as little kids. And my bad, I didn't mention, it was just trying to process everything together.
Yeah.
Um, he would take us as kids. We would go sometimes. Sometimes we wouldn't go. But um, it also came down to when me talking about what happened to me as a kid.
Hmm.
My sister in law brought it, and that's his wife. She brought it out. She got it out of me. At one time, I was at her house, and she spoke to me. She's like, "Is everything okay?" And that's where basically I told her what had happened to me as a kid, and it was just, it was basically, my brother was furious, and my sister in law too, and that's where they were there with me throughout that time where that was happening to me as a kid. And I mean, yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry I lost my little train of thought because I was just.
No, you're good. No, so you were kind of mentioning in regards to like you because I wanted just to know a little bit more as far as in like how did they end up in the picture, like your brother coming into the picture and inviting you into church, because you're sharing too in this moment like how you were asking God like why can't I be gay and still love you at the same time. So
Yeah.
what was going on in that moment in church, and actually after that, leading after that?
So throughout that moment in church, when I was going with my brother, um, he invited me to couple services. I mean, there was a moment that I was kind of going a little bit often, and I remember that this one time they were praying over me. It was a prophet. She was praying over me, and I remember that day as she was praying for me, the gift of tongues started coming out of me. I started praying in the whole heavenly language, and to me, I thought it was different. But I remember as in her praying over me, I remember seeing wings in back of her.
Mm-hmm.
I saw wings in back of her, and then I saw like a stadium in the back, like a huge stadium, and it just sounded. It looked like a lot of angels were just like rejoicing.
Yeah.
But that's where it was. I started having more of a connection with God, but at the same time where I was just struggling of not letting go of things,
Yeah.
and I couldn't understand what it was. So it was just hard for me, and I was just more stuck on the miserable life that I was dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, basically I just let it go throughout that time. And going back with my brother was the one that would reach out to me and tell me like, come on, let's go to church. And I would kind of like push away. I
Yeah.
would push it away. And yeah, that's where I was just kind of dealing with my own life. And you know, and to me, I just saw my brother as religious at that point, and I didn't understand.
Yeah.
But my brother, no matter what, he always respected me. He never came at me in any type of way, and he kept loving me no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so basically that's where it was. And I pulled away from church. I was back into the world, partying again. I Yeah, just doing all these crazy things. And at the age of 25, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, like somewhere around there, I I was I ended up having my first boyfriend. No, I'm sorry, it was 27. I ended up having my first boyfriend. Um and it was somebody from New York. It was a long distance relationship. We ended up meeting and everything. And um yeah, it was something more intimate, something that I was looking for throughout my life. I wanted to be loved. And yeah, I had it. I was in a relationship with this dude. And I mean, we ended up going through the breakup, and this is when I was going through the process of me getting the gastric bypass. We ended up going through the breakup. I had the gastric bypass, and basically, I kind of, as in me going through that process. Sorry. As in me going through that process, I was going through a heartbreak, and I was going through my weight loss journey. So once I started experiencing the weight loss, the skinnier side of me, I started getting more into lust, where I was getting hit on by guys. Guys were telling me like, "Oh, you're cute, this and that," and I'm not gonna lie, it made me feel good. I was just like, man, like finally somebody sees me.
Yeah.
And yeah, so when I was into that, I was stuck on Grinder. Grinder was a thing all the way from 18 till basically 31, 32.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I was on Grinder. I was talking to guys. I was meeting up with guys. You know, um, Me actually, my purpose was of trying to find a boyfriend, but it ended up of messing around, hooking up with somebody, and that was giving me a whole different. It opened up a new door to of me being insecure in a different way.
Yeah.
And that's where basically all that started happening. And Growler was becoming Growler was a thing like in 2017. I was question. I'm sorry. Yeah, 2017. I was questioning myself. Of Well, I was getting into the bear world, the bear community, because I was chunky and I felt very insecure with myself. So I was just like, okay, maybe I might fit into the bear community. And yeah, I started hanging around with some people from the bear community, and um, it was the same thing. It was the same thing. I mean, me going to the hookup scene, and I was not finding nothing out of that, and it's crazy because I mean, okay, so after, I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep this timeline together.
You're good.
So throughout 2018, me going through the breakup, the weight loss, I just I started I started basically growing my, no, you know what? Sorry, 2020, I was still doing drag, and that's when I was kind of going to raves. I started going to raves 2019 after my mom passed away.
Do the mic. Pull the
Can you
mic
hear
up a
me?
little bit. A little bit.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can.
Okay. So 2019, my mom ended up passing away. Um, she she had kidney failure, cirrhosis, and it was just another thing that I was grieving to. And um, yeah, as in my mom passing away, I started getting more into drinking, heavy drinking, uh, drinking once again every weekend, and I started doing mollies around that time. It wasn't a thing that I would do it often, but I was getting exposed into that, and yeah, so I went to raves, and it was something that I was fighting as well when I was doing that, because that's when I started feeling conviction throughout that time. I was feeling conviction of God showing me my past when I was doing crystal meth, of me not wanting to, I mean, of me doing crystal meth, of me not following that pattern that my mother lived.
Mm.
Basically, not only my mother, and now as I'm bringing up my family, I had other family members that were also involved in drugs as well. Um, but yeah, so it was something that God started giving me that conviction, and yeah, so basically I was going to raves, I was just partying it up, and I was living the lifestyle in lust, and that's where this one time me going through that, me going through the hookup scene, I ended up catching an STD, and as when I went through that moment of me catching an STD, and I'm thankful to God that it was curable.
Yeah.
That I was praying to God. I was telling God, like, I'm sorry, I'm dirty. I'm dirty, and I know I haven't been respecting my body. And I kept hearing something, if I don't stop doing what I was doing, that something worse was gonna happen. So throughout that time, I mean, I stopped for a minute, but I continued doing it again. And this was already through the pandemic, time. This is kind of going already into 2020, 2021. I was back at it, I I was already transitioning from not doing drag, I mean not dressing up, not cross dressing, into letting my beard go. And could you guys hear?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. So I was going into that transition of me not doing drag, I mean cross dressing, into letting my facial hair grow, and I was getting more into my masculine side, and that's where I just started getting back into the hookup scene again. And I was live stream was a big thing in the pandemic times, and I was getting to know guys. I was getting to know guys through that. I was talking to guys, and yeah, so with that, it was just once again me partying, messing around, and doing all that. And 20 2022, that's where I was basically getting visited by God again. And once again, I end up getting, I got an STD again.
Wow.
And God literally, He was telling me again, like, you know what? If you don't stop, you're gonna have something that's not gonna be curable, and it's gonna lead you to death. And that's where I was just going through like a depression mode because I just kept going through a pattern of me wanting to party a lot, not being responsible, uh, me not being able to hold a job for a long period of time. It was just so much things that I was going through, and where I was telling God, like, you know what, God, like, I need to get right with you. I need to get right with you. And it was it was becoming more of a thing of me wanting to stop drinking already, but I didn't have a church. I was trying to find my way to God.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I would I would start doing right, I would fall again. And then that's where I was just basically like walking in shame because I started drinking again. And yeah, so I was just like, man, like, I don't think I'm the right fit. I don't think I'm good enough for you, God. Like, I keep promising that I'm gonna stop, and I can't stop.
So when
So
so when was the turning point, as far as in, like, actually being invited to church and actually having like your encounter with the Lord place? Was this like in the same time frame that you're talking about right now?
no, it was 2023,
Yeah.
last year. Last year. So this was 2022, and 2023 was the time where it actually happened that this one time I was gonna go hook up with a random guy, barely met that same day. Um, and I was getting tugged, and God was telling me not to go, but the enemy was telling me like go, and I kept hearing both voices, and when I went to go meet up, I still went. I kind of basically like just ignored God, and I just kept. I went to go meet up with this person. So when I met up with this guy, um, it was we're chilling in a jacuzzi throughout the all night, and it was in a public area. And I remember that day when I was hanging around with this guy. This guy was just telling me he loved me. I'm like, dude, how could you tell me you love me if you don't even know me?
Yeah.
And I remember that we were kissing, and I looked at him in the eyes. When I looked at him in the eyes, I was able to see past his soul. It was something very different that I've never experienced. And I basically saw him physically, but I was able to see like inside his eyes, and I saw something very dark, and at the same time I saw like the smile stretch.
Mm.
And I just shake my head off. I was just like, I think I'm tripping. I don't think that's, maybe it might be the Mike's Hard Lemonade that I drink, but I'm like, no, it can't be. I only had like three. So it kept I kept getting conviction throughout the time that I was hanging around with this guy, because I was, as he told me about him leaving his house because his family were Christian. We were talking, and he was telling me that he left because they didn't accept him for who he was. And that's where I just started feeling more wrong from, like, God, like, I was like, I know you hear me, but he's lost. And I felt lost within myself around that time, but I was just like, man, like, I was just confused. I was going through it was just, I was confused overall. And so that night that I ended up leaving that guy's house, I was in my car crying. And once again, I was just telling God, like, I'm sorry, God. Like, I keep failing you. I keep failing you so many times, and I just I don't know. I don't know where to start, and that's where I was numb for a couple of days. I was numb for a couple of days. I felt depressed. It was the worst feeling ever. And this one time that I was driving out in the desert, I was driving out in the desert. I was listening to Cody Carnes.
Hmm.
Are you familiar with Nothing Else?
Yeah.
Okay, so when I heard the lyrics where he was saying, "I'm caught up in your presence, I just want to lay here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment, I never want to leave." And when I heard that, like my whole life flashed before my eyes, and God was like just telling me like, "You went through this as a child, and I was there, walking right beside you. I was always guiding." Basically, God was telling me that He was always guiding me, and He brought up a dream that I had as a child of me walking to. There was like a little town. It was a little town, and it was a roundabout, and in that roundabout there was a gazebo, a garden around. It was such a beautiful gazebo, and I remember walking up to that gazebo, and there was a man with the white robe. I couldn't see his face, and I'm sorry, guys.
You're good.
Oh, um, I saw him sitting down right there, and I saw him sitting down right there, and I was washing his feet, and I'm like, God, like, you're more than real because you were always here.
Hmm.
Sorry.
You're good.
I'm like, you were always there taking care of me. Like, I know I've been through this, I've been through that, but you, throughout my whole life, you kept telling me, like, to get away from certain things. And that's where I was just like, God, like, I don't know how to start. I don't know how to start this life, but Lord, like, I put everything in the table, and I'm willing to just move forward and having a relationship with you. And since then, it was hard for me to understand what it was to, if I could still keep living that life, that homosexual lifestyle. But God started revealing so much to me, and since then, you know, I started going. I I started going to church, and once I started going to church, I started having my community of brothers and sisters in Christ, and I started meeting other brothers that could relate to the life that I was going through, and they ended up becoming very good friend of mine. And I mean, throughout that time, I felt like a child again. I felt like a child where I was just always asking God questions, as in me doing Uber. I was doing Uber constantly because I wanted to pull myself away from a lot of people. And I would always be like, God, what adventures are we getting on today? And God started just giving me that new strength because I used to be very timid, and God just started giving me that voice, and I just a voice of excitement where I would tell everybody like where God freed me from, and how much He's done for my life. And I started evangelizing, as in me doing Uber, just telling people like God is so good, or sometimes I would read a verse and it would click in with that day, and I'm like, oh my God, like I learned this. It started becoming a very cool journey after that, and I mean, there was trials and tribulations after, but it's me always running to my father and knowing that physically I didn't have a father figure. I knew that my father, my real father, he's always there, been by my side, and right now where he's molding me to become something better than what I used to be, and that's where I see my freedom at.
That's so good. So let's talk about the you made a TikTok reel. It's on your Instagram. I actually recently posted on my personal page. You you made a public declaration. You already had this encounter with the Lord, and again, too many of us know who've actually come out of a lifestyle. It's a process. David's been serving the Lord for about a year. He's still walking out this process, and to be honest, we're all going to continuously, no matter where you come from, we're all going to continuously go through a process. God is always going to develop us, always going to purge us, always going to reveal new things to us to get us into that place, right? But what I love about your story, because not only did you go through the process of submitting yourself to the Lord, following as far as in making that public declaration, because it's one thing to make a public declaration, but you made a declaration in your heart saying, Lord, I give myself to you, whatever that looks like. I don't know what this journey is going to look like, but I'm willing to take it with you. So what was the day like when you actually did that at your church service, when you begin to throw all your drag stuff into the trash can? What led into that moment? What was that moment like for you in that moment?
So as I mean, I was plugged into the church community. I was taking these classes. They call them Holy Warrior classes. I started getting more rooted into the Word. I started getting more into prayer, and they this is they call it idol crushing, and they do it once a month. So when they mentioned that, it was just something that I started praying over my house, my room, and I would ask God, like, God, what are things that I need to start getting rid of? And I had all that stuff in the garage, and I was like, Lord, I'm willing to step up there to show you how much I'm willing to give up my life. Sorry, guys. How much I'm willing to give up my life because you showed me enough already. And with me knowing that you gave your life on the cross to forgive us from our sins, it's more than enough. And to me, even though that day I felt nervous, the day before I was going through warfare, and this was a time of, again, of guys trying to message me, everything, and I was just like, nope, I'm not gonna let it get to me. And as there's this saying, they say there's new levels, or new levels, or higher levels, new devils, or something like that. I don't know how it says, but yeah. So when I went through that, I was just like, God, like, this is for you, Lord, and this is a leap of faith, Lord, and I know you're here by my side, and it's just admiring a lot of people from a lot of good testimonies from the Bible, as in like David fighting Goliath, Moses coming back to Egypt to get all the people, and all these other stories. It was uplifting me more, and it's just like, Lord, like, this is my testimony, and you know what, Lord, like, this is all for your glory, and you're giving me the strength, and I'm willing to do whatever it is, Lord, where you're trying to send me. So yeah, basically that's what it was.
That's so good. What first I want to say, David, I admire you for sharing your testimony, because it's not always easy sharing your story. And again, too, when God pulls us out of a place, and you mentioned Moses. See, one thing I love about the story of Moses, because we read throughout Scripture when he was in Egypt, and actually he had a position there, and when we actually see throughout Scripture how two Hebrews begin to fight each other, and long story short, Moses began to break them up. But also too, we read that Moses ended up murdering an Egyptian, and he ended up burying his body. Then he took off into a place into the wilderness. But we also see that the Lord called him to go back to the place where all of that took place. See, that's what the Lord does. When the Lord begins to pull us out of a place, He strengthens us and begins to do a work in us but it's sooner or later he will begin to position us to take us back to the place we were, not to be a part of it, but to begin to set those people free. So this is what we're doing right now. This is a Moses moment for you, where you're sharing your story of what God is doing of your past. People are going to hear it. People will begin to be set free. See, that's the power of the testimony. So that's what I love about. I love that story in general. So I admire you, and I commend you for actually making that step, because it's not easy. The process is not easy, but the Lord will empower you. Always remember that the Holy Spirit in you will always empower you to overcome. You are already an overcomer, right? You're
Amen.
ready to overcome. So when you share your story, no matter where you share it at, it's like the Bible talks about how Jesus' death on the cross made a public spectacle of the enemy, meaning it made the enemy look dumb. So, because when the enemy thought he had you, David, and now that the Lord delivered you and you're sharing your testimony, it's like you're making him look to be a fool, stupid, just people mocking him, because what he thought he had, he really didn't. He had no power over you. And
Yeah.
seeing your freedom, and you're walking out your freedom, is such a beautiful thing. And you're going to continuously grow in the Word. You're going to continuously grow and figuring out who you are in Christ, your identity, and that's going to be an amazing thing, a journey. I've been saved for about 12 years now, and I'm still learning, and I'm still growing. So you're gonna live to see that day. I was praying for you in the beginning before we end up going live, and I prayed over you, and I was telling you you will finish your race. So I want to tell you right now, David, you won't go back. I don't know if that's a fear. You won't go back. You will finish your race, what God has done for you, and the Lord will use you and your story to do many great exploits within for the kingdom of God. And
Amen.
I just appreciate you coming on here and your vulnerability to share that story, because I could share my testimony, and I've shared it many times in regarding dark stuff, and especially too dealing with rejection. Rejection is a thing, and I think the LGBTQ community deals with rejection, and I think that right there that's why they're always in the need to want acceptance, because a root of rejection was always stemmed there. It was always a root there for always wanting to be seen, always wanting to be heard, always wanted to be loved, all that stuff. And I want to go back to something you mentioned in the beginning, how you always knew it was wrong to feel when you're as a child, to feel like that. As far as an attraction to wanting something that that just didn't sound right, it didn't feel right, you just knew that it was wrong. In the Bible, it talks about how God has written the law upon our hearts, and this is why we know right from wrong. And I think this is why a lot of people in that community, they struggle with, before even coming out of the closet. Let's just say that's what the term they use. I'm just going to come out of the closet. But while they're in that closet, they deal with fear. They deal with, I feel like this is wrong. I feel like people are going to judge me. They just have this knowing that it's wrong. And that's the law of God. That's the law of God written on their hearts, letting them know this is not what I have planned for you. I have a plan and purpose for you, and this is not it. And this is something that they war with, and this is something that they give into. And that's where they make their own decisions to do what they do. And again, too, you made a public decision, and just within in your own personal heart, but also too in front of other people. Like, this is the journey I want to go on. And what I love about how you said is that your church celebrated you, but took you in and really began just to empower you and really disciple you, and that's so important. Before we end, I want to ask you a question. So
Okay.
we talked about the testimony, and this is what we're doing right now. Can you encourage someone who may be struggling with sharing their story? Is there anything that you can say to them to encourage them to whether if it's to get on a Facebook Live, or to share with their neighbor or their coworker, to share their testimony? What would you say to that one person who's sharing their story?
Your guys' testimony means a lot, and it took a lot to actually get on this platform. Um, but you know what? If it's it's a weight lifted off, and it shows it shows how good God is. And we would love to hear your guys' story, because you know what? We would love to see. where God's been throughout your guys' life and everything, and it's just something encouraging. And us as brothers and sisters in Christ, we're here for one another, and we're here to uplift each other and know that you guys aren't alone. So basically, we're all here for God's kingdom and how good God has been to us, and yeah, we're here.
That's so good. All right, David. So let's tell the people how they can follow you. Is there any other social media platforms that you do have? If so, how
Yeah.
can they follow you?
I have TikTok, I have Instagram and Facebook.
Mhm.
Those are where I'm active the most. You guys could follow me here on David Torres. You guys could follow me on TikTok. It's sorry, it's boyunique.50518, and my Instagram is boyunique11.
What do you need to limit? All right. All right. Go, David, just go ahead and stay on with me for a minute.
Okay.
All right, everybody. I appreciate you guys for tuning in with us for this last testimony in June, the month of promise. I'm so excited. I will definitely have new guests coming next year to share their testimony, what the Lord has done for them as well. So, do me a favor, if you're still on here, go ahead and like and share this live. This live will be on YouTube as well, so you're able to share it through someone who's maybe not be on social media. You're able to share with them through via YouTube, my YouTube channel. So again, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you, David. Again, just go ahead and stay on with me, and then we'll see you guys later. God bless.
God bless you guys.